Chris Hensley is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member of FINRA SIPC, investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Houston First Financial Group are not affiliated.
The Houston Midtown chapter of the Society for Financial Awareness presents Money Matters with your host, Christopher Hensley.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to Money Matters on KPFT Houston. I'm Chris Hensley. The time is 11 a.m. and we have a great show lined up for you today. Deciding what to create at modern companies often looks like an episode of Mad Men. People throw ideas around until one sounds sexy enough to execute, and then they scale it to everyone. The result? Companies overspend on marketing to drive engagement with products and services that people don't want and won't help them be happier and healthier. Start at the End offers a new framework for design grounded in behavioral science. Technology executive and behavioral scientist Matt Wallaert argues that the purpose of everything is behavior change. By starting with outcomes instead of processes, the most effective companies understand what people want to do and why they aren't already doing it. Then build products and services to bridge the gap. Our guest today is Matt Wallaert. He will be joining us very, very shortly to do kind of a deep dive into his book, Start at the End. But with that, if you are a longtime listener, you know we always use just the first few moments of the show to kind of tell you a little bit about what's going on in the Houston and the Gulf Coast region when it comes to financial literacy. We are always talking about Houston Money Week on this show. I am a member of the leadership team, and even though we're here in the summer, there's not much going on, you would think, but we are already getting ramped up for Houston Money Week 2020. This week, got some emails, and we've put it on the calendar to start meeting, and it will be, ramping up like a big party. When you get prepared for it, it takes months and months, but before you know it, it's actually here. Houston Money Week is a nonprofit initiative to provide free financial literacy for Houstonians. Used to be able to just say Houstonians, but it's actually the whole Gulf Coast region now. We've got people out in Conroe, Texas A&M, the Woodlands, for-profit agencies, nonprofits, banks, universities, high schools, middle schools, all the way, even the city of Houston has supported Houston Money Week events in the past. Until the next April, when it does start, I would point people to our website, which is houstonmoneyweek.org. This is a dynamic website, and so you'll see a lot of our nonprofit partners who are offering financial literacy year-round, not just in April, not just during Financial Literacy Month. We'll add events to the calendar there. So a couple different ways to find out if you're looking for financial literacy information. You can put in your zip code and it will find one near you, or you can go in under the subject that you are looking for. So if you're looking for tax preparation through one of our VITA partners, even though we're past April now, you will see which nonprofit partners are involved in that for low to moderate income people who need free help with tax preparation. But many, many other talks, workshops, webinars even that come up throughout the year. So always check in at HoustonMoneyWeek.org. With that, let's go ahead and get Matt on the line here to maximize the amount of time that we have. Matt, are you there?
Right here.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So we know from the intro earlier that you are a behavioral psychologist, that you're what's called a behavioral scientist. But can you share a little bit about yourself, maybe a little bit different than that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's so many ways to define a person. I'm a first-generation college kid. I'm from rural Oregon. I have a almost 4-year-old son. I mean, take your pick.
There you go. Any of those, just so our listeners can get to know you a little bit better. There, we talked a little bit in the intro about the book. Start at the end. I'm intrigued with the idea. Why did you write this book?
You know, I really passionately believe that the world gets better when we do two things, and they're nicely combined in the word behavioral science. And one of those is to recognize that the outcome of everything that we do, when we build something in the world, when we create something, it exists to change behavior, right? If I build a chair, it's to get people to sit, right? If I blaze a trail, it's to get people to walk there. And so if we put behavior as our outcome, and then that second part is really that science, that putting a method behind it that says, given that I have this behavioral outcome, I am going to run experiments to get there. I'm going to be clear about what the output is that I want, and then I'm going to work my way there, and so that I know what success and failure look like.
What was one of the most surprising things that you came upon when you were writing this book?
You know, honestly, and maybe this happens to all authors, this is the only book I've ever written, it was surprising to me how much just the act of writing it down clarified, structured, changed how I thought about it in the world. It is so fascinating that, you know, writing a book is a process, and, you know, sort of 6 or 12 months later, after the book is written and then it comes out, I read it and I'm like, I don't know if I agree with this anymore. And to me, that's exciting, right? It means that the field is evolving, I'm evolving, how we do this is evolving, right? And that's good. That's the iteration that we want.
I love that. It's that discovery and realization. Even when the book's done, you look back, okay, well, it's changed.
That's right. You know, my publisher jokes about, like, great, that's when you just make edition 2. But it is fascinating to me to have that opportunity to self-reflect.
Absolutely. Tell us about how some of the things that you talk about in the book apply to organizations and companies.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, organizations and companies, just like, you know, individuals that build things, are trying to change the behaviors of others. You know, and whether that's, you know, Coca-Cola trying to get people to drink more soda, or whether that's a financial nonprofit trying to get people to save money, and everything in between, you know, we are all struggling to change behavior, and many times we're struggling against each other, right? You know, McDonald's wants you to eat this, you know, some anti-obesity thing wants you to not eat that. And so we're struggling to figure out how to do that. And, you know, big companies usually do it in the most crude possible way, which is advertising. Really, really large budgets, to basically create what we call promoting pressures, right? A motivating pressure to make us do something or make us want to do something more often. And I think one of the great things about behavioral scientists is it lays out a little bit about how both as individuals and organizations, we can struggle against those sort of buying of attention by, you know, programming in our environment, creating things that change those behaviors.
So I wrote down advertising and then promoting pressures. What does promoting pressures mean?
You know, when we think about changing behavior, right, we talk about a behavior as the competition between two sets of pressures. Promoting pressure, something that makes a behavior more likely, and inhibiting pressure, something that makes a behavior less likely. And so the canonical example I always use is M&Ms. Why do we eat M&Ms?
They're good.
Right, they taste good, right? That's a promoting pressure. Taste is a promoting pressure. Color is a promoting pressure. We eat them because they are beautiful, right? That makes us more likely to eat them. Brand, advertising, you know, the fact that we're a little bit hungry, right? We're, you know, Snickers leans into the, like, oh, you're not yourself if you haven't had a Snickers. They coined the term hangry, right? There's all these promoting pressures. Why? So, you know, there's lots of really great reasons to write M&Ms. You're not eating any right now. Why not?
Why am I not eating M&Ms?
Why are you not eating M&Ms?
I'm trying to avoid sweets.
There you go. So health-related reasons, right? So health is a powerful inhibiting pressure. It's a reason not to eat these calories. They're not free, so cost is an inhibiting pressure. Availability, like I'm not in the studio with you, but I imagine you're not sitting in front of a giant bowl of M&Ms right now, right? If you wanted to go get some, you'd have to get somebody to bring some to you. They're not readily available to you. All of those are inhibiting pressures. And so when we try and change behavior, what we are doing, we can't affect behavior directly. All we can do is change the pressures that create behavior. So if I wanted to help myself avoid M&Ms, for example, I could make sure that there were none in my house. I could, we've all seen this sort of joke or trope when you like throw it in the garbage and then, cover it in something else so that you can't like get it back out of the garbage, right?
Yes.
Like, all these sorts of things that we do to control our behavior. That's exactly what I want people to sort of systematically plan for. So if you, for example, are trying to avoid sweets, you can be attentive to not only, hey, what makes me less likely to eat sweets, inhibiting pressures like not having them available, but also what makes me likely to eat sweets in the first place. So, for example, I tend to eat sweets when I'm really tired, so I'm going to sleep more so that I don't get really tired, so that I don't eat sweets.
If we were to kind of sidestep and talk about people apply this to savings, what could you tell us about why people save or why they don't?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think you can think about it from savings, you can think about it from spending, right? And so if you wanted to save as much as possible, let's say the physical act of actually putting something into a savings account, right, as a definition of save, right? You can look at what are all of the promoting pressures? What are the reasons that I save? How do I ramp those up? So traditional apps have often focused on, for example, goal setting and ways of making those goals more salient, right? If I'm saving for a beach house, I'm going to make a vision board with a picture of that beach house, and I'm going to associate that with the goal, and I'm going to put it somewhere that I see it very often, and that I have the opportunity to save, right? Those are all promoting pressure things. You also can minimize inhibiting pressures, right? One of the hardest things about saving is, you have to log in and physically do it. So automatic deposits remove the inhibiting pressure. Automatic deposits don't make you want to save, but they make saving easier by eliminating inhibiting pressures. Vice versa for spending. Let's say you wanted to control your spending. You want to look at two sets of things. Well, how do I make spending harder? And what do I have to do? And why am I spending in the first place? So a really great example of that is I'm going to use cash instead of credit, right? Instead of using electronic forms of payment, I'm always going to pay in cash. And so there's a tangible feeling of loss. I know how much money I have. I'm not going to keep that much cash on me. One of the really great, hacks that you can do is leave your wallet in the car. You're like, I need to go buy a TV. Well, great. Go in, look at all the TVs, pick out the one you want, and then walk back to your car and get your wallet. And if you still want to go back into the store with your wallet, now that you've spent a little extra time, you've given yourself some time to consider, then, you're making a rational, educated choice about buying this TV. But all of those little inhibiting pressures, having to walk back out to the car, giving yourself some time to think about it, may change your behavior. You may not decide not to make that expensive purchase. Now, do I think that people are actually going to leave their wallet in the car? Maybe, maybe not, right? But it is a way of thinking about how to approach our own behavior that I think is really key.
I love it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense for the saving and the spending to apply it that way. Let's talk a little bit about one of the main themes of the book is building products that create change. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that we just talked about something, let's say you personally were trying to spend or save money that you individually could do about your own behavior. But organizations create products, programs, services, whatever, that are trying to do that at a much more structural and deep level. So we talked about advertising briefly, which is one really, really blunt way of doing it. But there are tons of things in actually designing things that cause that to occur. And so what the book is broadly about is trying to get people to write something we call a behavioral statement, which is a very clear articulation of what behavior you're trying to change and for what people and in what context. And then focusing on that behavioral statement as a way of guiding your process to actually designing and creating things.
I love that. So the behavioral statement, really focusing on what people you're trying to change behavior with, and then the second part was how to change. Or say that one more time.
What behavior you're trying to change. So a behavioral statement in full is when a population has a motivation and some limitations, they will behavior as measured by data. And so you're filling in each of those variables. So, for example, when let's do the radio show. When people in general who want to learn about finance, when people in general want to learn about finance and they have access to a radio, they will listen to this segment as measured by number of listeners, right? And so if we then construct that as a statement, you and I could get together to then actively design for that outcome. What do we need to do to cause people to listen to the radio? And we can talk about sort of how do we create the desire to do that in the first place, how to create that motivation, and then how do we make it easier, right? Maybe we make an app that puts a little reminder on their calendar of when the show is on, and so it pops up, so their calendar pops up an alert and says, like, hey, don't forget to listen, right? That's a good example of a product that removes inhibiting pressure to the behavior that we want.
I love it, because a lot of times when people think about creating products, you get that light bulb eureka moment and it just pops in your head. That's kind of what they think. And this is working backwards from beginning with the end in mind of who you're trying to feel a need and getting in front of them and that behavior, changing that behavior. What are you catering to do that?
Yeah, I think you said something really important in there, which is, I think you've described the process for a lot of people. We fall really in love with our idea, right? In sort of behavior change parlance, your intervention, right? A product is an intervention. It changes the system of the world to change behavior. And one of the sayings that we have as product people in the world, right, in technology, is frequently fall in love with your problem, not your solution, right? Your individual solution is not better or worse than any other solution. Like, what you care about is the problem. And so definitionally, whatever solution solves the problem is the best solution. And so if you start with here's the behavior I want, whatever product then changes that behavior the best or the most, according to the data that allows us to measure it, is fundamentally the best product. It's not a good product because I'm in love with it. It's not a good product because it's clever or appealing or sounds really good when I say it out loud. It's a good product because it changes behavior. And what starting at the end does and specifying a behavior is it allows us to compare things against each other. I can say this is a better or worse chair based on how successful it is at getting people to sit in.
I love metrics and being able to quantify stuff. So I like the idea of having something to point to and say, okay, we either did it or we didn't do it.
Exactly. And really good products, this is part of the data revolution, I think, is really good products take that behavior and then are able to measure them from a data-driven perspective. If you look at a company like Lyft or Uber, or one of the ride-sharing companies versus traditional cabs, one of the problems with traditional cabs is the data was really messy. It was hard to know how many rides were being taken and by who and where they went, right? None of that was tracked. But within a Lyft or an Uber, right, that company knows, I know exactly how many rides happened. I know it instantaneously. I know who rode and where they went. There's a plethora of data that then allows me to say, did this behavior happen or not happen, right? If you made a behavioral statement that was, when people want to do something, they'll take a cab as measured by number of rides, cab companies couldn't even tell you number of rides, right? So they literally can't, they want to inspire a behavior, take this cab, but they have no way of measuring the behavior that they want. And that's a fundamental problem.
I would think that as the further we get along the technology road, we're getting more and more tools to help with that. Is that what you found from the book or from the research?
Yeah, certainly I think we now have better systems to measure behavior than we ever have before, but those systems are only as good as the people who run them, right? I still think there's a ton of, madmen in the world who, are out there doing something because it's a creative, good-sounding idea, not because they have science, not because they've tracked a behavior, not because they've used the data. Having the data and using the data are very different things. Technology can take care of having the data. It cannot cause us to use the data. That's why we need books like Start at the End. That's why we need training on these things. I think we need new kinds of college classes. I think we need new forms of education that are about the operation of the tools that we have created. The tools themselves will not create behavior change. They must be operated by people.
I love it. So you've got that tools over here, and you said it's only as good as the people who run them. So it's a garbage in, garbage out. Like, you've got the information, but we're looking at almost a new breakthrough when it comes to the data and being able to measure and all of that. So the book Start at the End. This is kind of a deep dive into that. I want to kind of pause and sidestep a little bit, because I would hate to be speaking with you and not get into your organization Get Raised, because when I got online, I looked at it, I really like the idea. Can you tell us a little bit about that in the last few, well, we've got about 10 minutes left, but can you tell us a little bit about kind of what that is and why you started that?
Yeah, sure. So the first startup I ever worked at, which was founded by a guy named Avi Karnani and Ori Schnaps, was a personal finance product. It was Mint.com's biggest competitor, called Thrive. It was sold to LendingTree. And when we came out of, being a good product person is basically like, even when things go well, being like, but I failed at this, now I have to go fix it. So one of the things that, it was a very successful product. It was very good at changing financial behaviors. But one of the problems it had was it only looked at what happened once you earned a paycheck. And one of the things that we found was, men's behavior with their paychecks, the way that men manage their money, was actually worse than women. But because they were paid more in the first place, that was hidden. They had better outcomes because they had more raw resources. And so we decided we wanted to fix this problem. How do we actually change the paycheck that women are getting? Women in general white women are underpaid by about 20 cents on the dollar, black women by more like 35 cents, and Hispanic women as much as 50 cents. And so we wanted to sort of change these numbers. And so what we did was, using this same framework, we looked at the sort of pressures that were creating behaviors, and we figured it was not a problem of promoting pressure. No woman says, I want to be paid less than a man for the equivalent work, right? That's not it's not a lack of wanting to be paid fairly. So it must be about inhibiting pressures. So what we did was build a tool called Get Raised, which was solely focused on reducing inhibiting pressures. And so what you do is you come in, you tell us what you do, where you work, how much you make, and we'll tell you if you're underpaid using Bureau of Labor Statistics data. So we'll tell you, hey, there's a real problem here. We'll then ask you a few more questions that actually generates a letter that you can give to your boss asking for a raise, that sort of lays out a very logical business case of here's the market data that shows that I'm underpaid. Here's the value I've created for the business since the last time we reviewed my compensation. Lays out a very logical, straightforward reason that your compensation should be adjusted. And it turns out that that's incredibly effective. It's a free tool. It doesn't take very long, 10, 15 minutes. And in general, women who hand in the letter about 80% of the time do get a raise, and the average raise is about $8,000. And so at this point, we've helped women earn over $3.2 billion in raises over the course of the last 5 or so years from a very short tool, but that use this framework to get to something, very pointy so that it could actually address the behavior we cared about.
I love it. We, back on, episode 51, we had Kim Keating. She had wrote a chapter in Lean In for graduates, and we talked about negotiating your salary and what a problem it is for people to even approach it. And we've got gender inequality when it comes to the paycheck. And so the organization that you helped co-found here, this tool seems pretty along those lines. What were some of the things that, as it's rolled out, do you have any success stories of people who've used this free resource here and had positive results?
Yeah, absolutely. At this point, we've helped people get over $3.2 billion in raises. So at a macro level, it's working. But there's been lots of fun stories along the way. At one point, Avi Karnani, who worked on Get Raised with me, was doing some user calls, and he was following up with users, and the user said, oh, yes, I'm actually sitting here about to go into my raise meeting. And he then got to do a little impromptu coaching right before the raise meeting over the phone, which I thought was great. It just sort of happened to work out that way, and it was lovely. It's been fascinating, actually, to see the responses of employers. I think when we initially built it, we were a little concerned that employers would hate us, right? That this would cause, a massive number of people to go ask for raises, and that would be a problem for employers. And if anything, we've received actually the precisely opposite feedback. The feedback that we get from employers is this used to be a very uncomfortable conversation, right? Because it frequently had no data and no structure associated with it. Matt feels like he should make more money. Avi doesn't feel like he wants to give him more money. Now we're just arguing about opinions or feelings. And what employers have said to us is, no, now people walk in and they say, here's market data. Here's how I think I'm bringing business value. And that means that there's now a structure to say, well, let's look at the market together. Here's why I think that market data isn't right. Or here's why I think you haven't demonstrated this business value, and here's what you would need to do to demonstrate this business value. And I think that's really that adding that structure to the conversation actually creates a sort of amazing ability to have a conversation. I frequently say that one of the things that Get Raised has done really successfully is go from a negotiation, right? You and I are sitting on opposite sides of the table. You're trying to drive my salary as low as possible. I'm trying to drive my salary as high as possible, to collaboration, right? There is a problem that is my compensation, right? There is some accurate compensation. Neither you nor I know that number. So we collaboratively work together using a set of facts to try and figure out what that number should be, right? So it reorients us to collaboratively working on a problem as opposed to competitively trying to sort of modify what we get.
I love it. You have the idea of somebody barging into the boss's office, and that's not going to work necessarily. And this puts you on the same side of the table. It goes from a negotiation to a collaborative process that you're working through together. I love that. Now, I know the book we're talking about, Start at the End, that came out, that was released in June of this year. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was very recent, right? The book just came out. We're still learning a lot of things and getting reactions from the market, and it's been a fun experience. Get Raised, on the other hand, has been out for many, many years. It's something we built a long time ago and continue to sort of keep running as best we can. The hope is we always, hope that someday we'll find the right partner and be able to successfully, give Get Raised to them to take it to the next level. Lean In and others have been great partners over the years, but I'd love to see a bank somewhere or something really take this on and give it to 20 million or 50 million women and say, like, all right, we're going to really take this on as an issue. Because I think that what people miss out on in the gender wage conversation is that there are very real stakes here, right? If you're a bank or a credit card or some financial institution, you should want to maximize the income of your customers, because that money is going to go into savings accounts. It's going to flow onto your credit cards. It's going to go into your investment products. Like, should be all motivated by increasing the salaries and promoting fair and equitable pay. It's actually beneficial to the whole system. So someday I hope we find the right partner there for that one.
I would love to see that. If you were to see an intersection between your work at Get Raised and the book Start at the End, was there something obvious that where they intersected, where the work at one influenced the other, or maybe vice versa?
Yeah, I think everything actually is very blended together. The book is a product. It was interesting. At the book launch party, I had a great crowd. About 200 of my friends showed up, and we got to sit down and talk for a little while. And there was a sort of a brief fireside chat, and someone asked a very similar question. And I said, it's interesting to me. The book is just truly the product of experience. It's the product of a long history of conversations and building things with other people and doing it wrong and making mistakes and finding new ways to do it. And so things like Get Raised, focusing on the inhibiting pressures really taught me something about how I wanted to approach projects in the future. And I think that goes back to, bringing it full circle back to the beginning of the interview. I think part of the reason that, even 6 months after I wrote the book, I have new ideas or would do things differently is because I've built and done new things and had new conversations in those 6 months. There's a great example. The book is Start at the End. And all of these very clever reviewers are like, kind of make jokes about, like, should I do that with the book? Should I start on the last page? And I'm like, in version 2, I really need to have like an Easter egg on the last page or something that sort of says, like, congratulations, you've followed instructions and started here, go back to the beginning of the book or something, right? Like, you learn something over time, and I actually think that's really fun and really good.
Well, good. I didn't use that one, so you would have been like, I've heard that one before.
Yeah, but when you're a psychologist, you hear a lot of the same jokes. Yeah, I get a lot of mind reading jokes, and that's okay. I think that I could laugh at them, and for something like this, this is an obvious chance. I should have done something. I just am not as clever as reviewers, it appears.
I love it, Matt. We are right here at the end of the show. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. In the last minute here, what have I forgot to ask you that you'd like to share with listeners as we close the show out?
No, this has been super lovely, and thank you so much for having me. I think you asked really great questions, and we got to have a good and fruitful conversation. I think, if I could end it somewhere, I think I would remind people that you don't need a PhD, right? You don't need specialized training. We all change behavior all the time, right? To be human is to change other people, and take this opportunity to do that in a more clarified and structural way, to think about the process of how we change behavior.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Money Matters Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, visit us on the web at www.moneymatterspodcast.com. Drop us a line on SpeakPipe on the right-hand corner. It will receive any voicemails, questions, thoughts, concerns that you have about the show. In addition to this, we recently launched a Patreon campaign. Click on the Donate Now tab to hit the tip jar and find out what Patreon's campaign is all about.